Hello and welcome to Phishing for Answers. So, this podcast talks about all things human security and cybersecurity in general a little bit. Today, I am here with Tim Dzierzek, and we're going to open with maybe a little bit of a funny story. Do you have any good phishing stories or security awareness stories that you'd like to share with the audience here?
I feel like phishing and and security awareness can actually come up with some things that happen. Even for myself years ago, I would even say even outside of that area is when I was a young IT person of trying to react to a malicious software incident years ago and going through and then figure out what that message was and actually clicking on the link to it. And it just goes back to related to phishing and security awareness is that it doesn't take somebody just maliciously trying to do something or not following procedure. It can be accidental as well, and and you're always trying to work with people to understand that we're trying to teach you skills, but at the end of the day something can happen, and just reminding them if something happens, just let your security teams know that this happened so that we can react to it. And then just the idea of at any one time anybody can get. I just have this concept of anybody can get got. It's not
absolutely.
It's just not the the people that are just willy-nilly just clicking on things. Things have gotten so well done these days where if you're not paying attention and with how fast corporations are working these days, is that if you're just going through things and not thinking about it, something can happen. But like I said, at the end of the day, is if you realize it, let your security teams or IT teams know that it happens so that something can be done. Just don't go, oh gosh, if I report it, I'm in trouble. That cat is out of the bag already. That something has happened and something needs to be done.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that maybe users don't understand enough is that, the longer the bad guys are in there, the longer that incident draws out, the more it's going to cost the company typically too. You can almost count the dollars in seconds. So,
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. It looks like you got started in IT way back in 1996. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So I graduated from college with a history degree. So you'd go, well, how did you end up where you're at? So I joined the Marine Corps right after that into a technical field. My first job out of the Marine Corps was doing call center support. So I actually sat there and answered phone calls. From ground zero, worked my way into IT fields and into network engineering. Somewhere in there, I got my master's in information assurance, and I worked at a company called ID Analytics, which was a data broker at the time, and got offered the position to manage the information security team there and build the program out. And I've been in security ever since.
Very cool. So, talk to me about that sort of transition. What led you to make that transition into cybersecurity in the first place?
So, when I was in network engineering, and I've always had an interest in protecting systems. I feel like even from a physical security perspective, when I was in the Marine Corps, even just the funny story of doing guard duty, right? Physical security, right? It was something that I thought was important. When I first got the real interest in doing that from a job perspective was I was in network engineering, and and back when I got into network engineering in the early 2000s, late 90s, was people were bringing up their first internet connections and even just plopping them up. They were just building them. And there was a concept of, when I was working at a law firm, it was, are we doing enough to protect our routers, which were publicly accessible? It just happened at that time, there was an issue with an IT person in San Francisco that had locked its company out of all those routers and networking equipment. So it really led me to look through how we were doing things at the law firm, coming up with hey, there are best practices that exist to configure these things and to configure the network devices and harden them. Taking that to my boss at the time, and like any boss, he's like, well, you brought this to me. Hey, now you're responsible for the security of our network systems. And that led me into, I like doing this. It's kind of interesting of trying to stay one step ahead and seeing something and then going back and checking systems to make sure we're configured in the proper way. And that is the time when I got my master's in information assurance. And it is, like I said, it is an area where I don't look back. It's been the highs and lows of working. Some things go really, really bad and you have to be ready for them, but it's been a very rewarding field in the sense of you can actually see how what you're doing affects consumers, employees, and even making sure that people know outside of work the same activities that I'm teaching you to do now, you can do at home.
Yeah, and that's actually a really common theme that I hear people talk about, is just how interconnected your personal security awareness is and your corporate security awareness, and not even just security awareness, just cybersecurity in general. I mean, if I bring my my device in and it has malware on it and I connect it to the network, I'm potentially giving the bad guys a foothold on the network. And so, but vice versa, if I take my work laptop home and it has malware on it, I'm potentially infecting my home network. And so, I think that's maybe one of the things that a lot of our users don't necessarily understand enough, is that these things are very interconnected. But I will say I see a lot more a change where people are thinking more about their staff, and not just the corporate cybersecurity, but the personal cybersecurity as well. And so I'm really happy to sort of see that change in the industry. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, and how do you sort of drive that within your organization?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I feel like there was an old adage that I hope we drive out of security, which is that employees are the weakest link in our security. I feel like there's a level of it being really insulting. I kind of feel like our employees and any staff, I consider them to be no different from they're more like a physical IDS, right? Is that they will see things that you'll never see, and if you're treating people like they're incapable of doing that, you miss a layer of security where you're not really getting that information that you need, to improve the program or to let other employees know. So treating employees like, and really getting security embedded and create those relationships between security and even employees in different parts of the organization that aren't really truly tech really, is, if you see something, come and talk to us. There's no shame in doing that. It's important. If you have questions, even if it's home related, hey, my machine's doing this, what do you think? While there's a fine line there, is we do ourselves a disservice to say, don't talk to us unless it's this. There's a space that we'll only talk about. The building relationships, I think, is really important to security awareness. It's very much important to how we train our employees, that security teams and IT teams, we're here to help you, and just come and talk to us. And it may be something we go, don't worry about it. If somebody reports an email that looks to be phishing to them, you owe them a response back to say, yeah, you're right, thanks for reporting it, or no, it's not, it's technically spam, and explain what spam actually is. But really, the relationships between the security and IT teams is important to all areas of organizations, not even corporations, but all areas of the organization.
Yeah, no, I love what you hit on there, and you're talking about the you can't patch stupid mentality within the cybersecurity industry, and that's actually my soapbox. I can't stand that phrase, And it's because it's really multi-tiered or multifaceted. Is that number one, we're accepting defeat when we say you can't patch stupid. Number two, it's not about stupidity. Most of our users that are making these mistakes are not properly trained. And then number three, I think it almost sets you up for failure in all of your security training initiatives, because you go into it almost seeing the enemy or seeing the user as the enemy or as the opposition or as the somebody that's not on your same team. But that's not true. We are all on the same team fighting toward the same common goal. And so, while it's very innocent, and I don't blame anyone, because what's the first thing you learn when you get an IT? You learn, well, you can't patch stupid, or you learn about the PEBCAC error, or you learn about the ID10T error. And I'm sure you could probably name a few more that I haven't even thought of here. But that's the first thing anyone learns. And what I feel like is it tends to make us more adversarial. And so, that leads me to I guess really two questions. Number one, what is your soapbox, if you have one? What's your big thing, pet peeve in cybersecurity? And then number two, the follow-up that's more on topic would be carrots or sticks, and why?
Yeah, I think I feel like I'm in line with you of the mentality of you can't patch stupid. Being in software as a service as long as I've been in, is this adversarial relationship, and I feel like it's a fake adversarial relationship between security and the tech teams, security and developers. I mean, you talk with some peers even throughout the years, and I feel like it's gotten really a lot better. But it was like, well, developers don't care. They're more into coding. They're the various iterations that you convince yourself that they just don't care about security, and you've got to come in as a savior to fix them. For me, it goes back to education. We're educating developers, because throughout my career, it was very light on set training for developers. A lot of these developers learned from when they were kids, and they got into development, and they like it and they enjoy it. So there's a component of there is that they don't, there's areas of security from a coding perspective that they just don't know that you as a security person are responsible for doing and educating them on. But I feel like throughout my career, I have not run into a development team or a software developer that didn't want to develop good code. They pride themselves in it. There's a sense of, that is their baby, that's their kid, and they've been working on it for a long time. So there's a way to do it where you're talking to them about not what's bad about their code. It's like, well, this is how you can make it better, and that security flaws or quality problems, they're not separate from everything else. And a carrot, and from a carrot and a stick perspective, I kind of list that as more of accountability boards. Is if we can get to the point of hey, these teams have these quality flaws, and here's what we think we should do about them. Some of the times the quality flaws come in because they're under resourced. So the carrot is hey, let's work together to get you the right resources. But if we don't have that visibility into what's wrong, it gets me probably more into vulnerability management and software vulnerability management. But working with those teams and not treating them like they're idiots, which they're very knowledgeable, they're very smart, and creating an adversarial environment across an organization does not help security any. It's the relationships are so important, and you need to be able to, from a security perspective, talk to them on their level and what the outcome you want, and not treat them like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly about that, and I think that a lot of times for developers, they just don't know. I mean, I was a developer before I ever got into cybersecurity, sort of. I mean, I guess I did learn hacking a little bit when I was younger, but aside from that, I did spend very short segment of my career in development. And I didn't think about security once. I thought about the logic and how to form the logic and how to make it work and how to get it into production. And I think that all too often that's what happens. And it's not that they don't care, it's that they don't know to care. They maybe don't know about SQL injection and how detrimental it can be. And there is a lot more awareness now than there was, 20 years ago when I was a developer. But I think a lot of it, still remains. I mean, when we look at things like, well, the buffer overflow vulnerability, I mean, that was first discovered in 1976. And at the time, they said, oh, it'd be too much work to re-architect this, so we're not going to do it. And now we still have overflow in it, and that type or that class of vulnerability in our applications to this day. So I think that there was some level of awareness, but it didn't trickle down through academia into the curriculum so that the developers learned about it. And I think another part there is that even if they are learning about security, it's an afterthought. They spend 95% of their academia time learning how to code and 5% learning about security. And so I really think we still have a ways to grow from, everywhere from academia over to how we train people in the enterprise space, because I don't see enough OWASP top 10 training out there for the development teams and stuff like that. And so to that, let's talk about role-based training. Let's start with just at a broad scale. How effective is it? Are you utilizing any role-based training right now? And if so, what roles are you hitting on?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I feel like it's very appropriate for a company like iHealthcare that I work for, especially for the different, I mean, if you want to call them personas of the different roles that an employee would have related to providing services. So you're focused on training the developers. Obviously, you want to be able to baseline where they're at, and to try to focus on what areas of development that they may not be weak in. Weak for me is not a problem. It's not a problem. We all have weak areas, so just understand what that is and focusing on them. So whether it's whether it's doing capture flag, or cyber ranges, or even just getting away from the other funny story I have is for getting into starting my security career and teaching the OWASP top 10 risks for like the 5th time and getting in front of them, and you could actually see the developers' eyes just glaze over because they've heard the same messaging over and over and over again. So there is an aspect of if you're going to give training to technical teams, it needs to be different, and it needs to focus on areas of concern, and not give the same thing over and over again, because they've just stopped listening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's across the board that getting users to listen is a challenge. And I think Hollywood really does us a disjustice because they make cybersecurity out to be this thing that only a genius can understand. I mean, they really, really fantasize cyber or hacking in general and make it to be something that it isn't. And so I feel like that intimidates the average person, and they sort of look at cybersecurity and they just think, that's too complex for me. I'm not even going to try. What do you think? Do you think I'm right, or?
I definitely agree, and it's become like a very jargon based activity, and part of it is one is Hollywood makes attackers out to be these evil geniuses, and most of the time it's just run of the mill. I mean, it could be you or I, right? It's like they're basic people. There are very smart people. Even on the tech teams that I've worked at, there are very smart people that do the services for good. But the thought that they're evil geniuses and they can do just about anything. I mean, there probably is honestly people out there that can do it, but the average attacker is not an evil genius.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah, and just the concept of even in security, I feel like I work really hard over the past 13 years, is trying to take the tech out of of what security is, especially when you're talking with people that are outside the tech fields or not super technical. Is what is a phishing email? It's or social engineering in general. It sounds very complicated, but at the end of the day, it's no different from years ago when people were selling the Brooklyn Bridge to people, right? It's a confidence game, right? So that's it. Was just getting it to people to understand that it's while the action of the way people are doing it now is different and technical, it is nothing different from a pretty much a confidence game.
Yeah. I think that one of the other issues is that a lot of people just have really short attention spans. And we do live in a TikTok society nowadays where, everyone wants that, bit of training to take as much time as it would take to watch a reel or to watch, any short form content that you would find on the internet. What do you think? I mean, do you also find that people's attention spans are getting increasingly shorter, and that as a result, we sort of have to shorten and tighten up our security training as well?
I think I definitely agree with that. I can even see that in myself. Is that time I used to be able to read like long technical articles. Now I'm getting that articles getting shorter and shorter. Of I just read the highlights to it. And I think training is no different. Is back in the day when we were giving like 3 hours of security training at a shop, and people are like, I've got things to do. While I would say every organization would say that it is important and employees want to do it, but dedicating 3 straight hours of training in one period, I think is a large ask with everything else, and it's kind of, it ends up being a sign of security's not being empathetic to everything else that the business and employees need to do. So cutting them down into shorter segments is important, and spreading them across the year instead of doing that one big bang, like here's all your training for 1 year. I feel like it's important. And one example at IA is if somebody, we do quarterly phishing training. So if somebody clicks on a link, they get put into like a short 2-minute, like here's what you should have recognized, and here's how you continue to recognize it. And then that accelerates into something longer if they continue to do it. And that's worked best for me across all the organizations I've worked at, which is the failing is not technically the issue. It's a problem, but the one thing I learned, Jason Harkins was the chief security officer at PlayStation, and still is. But one of the things he instilled on my team when we were doing phishing training or any kind of security awareness training is what is your outcome? So your outcome is to do the training and teach people how to recognize them. And if they fail to recognize them, you're trying to educate them on how they failed that, but plus educating them on, hey, here's some reminders on how to not do that again. So I think it's important to, even in cases of remedial training or refreshing training, it's just that quick little because it can be flagged as punishment, and we're not punishing, we're reinforcing the training and the ability to recognize stuff that could potentially really hurt the business.
Oh yeah, 100%. A while back, I went down this rabbit hole of how do we make or turn social engineering into a tool for good? And it led me to a collaboration with some professors from around the globe of writing actual college coursework on how we can apply behavioral science to cybersecurity. And it talked about, how do we get results while also addressing compliance needs? And what you described there was one of the key points that we hit in on, and it's called spaced learning theory. And it's really the foundation of all of our advertising and the reason that globally people know the Coca-Cola brand. And so what it talks about is how when you break things into little bite-sized bits, it makes and feed it to them at a very high frequency, it makes things very memorable. And so, that's something I've always really tried to remember. And then the other part that you hit on there about the, what is the goal? It reminded me of, one of my pet peeves with phishing is user exploitation. If I'm doing a penetration test, I want to exploit your users. But if I'm doing my phishing training and simulations for the purposes of education, I don't want to exploit my users. And what I mean by that is that I see where, so many often they'll ask the user to type in their password. And sometimes the user doesn't even know they fell for a phish until they hear from management or information security. And at the moment that mistake is realized, that user is going through an actual chemical reaction in their brain because of the emotional response. And that creates new mental pathways that we can hijack to get better retention, meaning that the moment that they click is the best opportunity to educate. And so, I try to really, really drive home that we don't want to exploit, we want to train. And the second they hit that, they should know they clicked on a phish immediately, because that creates the emotional response. And then you want to follow that up with, what are 3 red flags from that phish that you could have identified to help you, avoid it. And that's how you create what I like to call human virus definitions.
Yeah, I definitely like that, because there was when security awareness training became, starting to be embedded in security programs, there was this idea of, we need to make it so hard that we trick everybody. And, the pushback on that is that, or the negative side of that is that now you're the enemy. Now I'm defensive, to this whole training activity, because you're just trying to get me now. And, so so going back to, just what outcome you're trying to get, even when you're building out security awareness or phishing exercise training, it's like, I just want, employees to be able to recognize them. I'm not even trying to make them hard. It's like, what is the core areas of things that they should check on an ongoing basis? And in some cases, at the start of those the campaigns and the start of your maturity journey on phishing is really just, can they recognize it and do they report it? And, and what are the easy ones so that they can look at to do that? Because if you don't, you're not really measuring, you're just failing pretty much everybody, because everybody, it gets busy and can get popped. While there's this big discussion in security of the attackers are not being empathetic, but I think that's a side issue, which is, we're trying to teach people to recognize them, to do an action, and not create a disconnect between security and the employees.
Oh, wholeheartedly. One of my favorite simulation domains that we have at PhishFirewall is do-not-click.us. And it's because before you get into anything complicated, you got to teach them to hover. You got to teach them to look at the sender address, to pay attention to the details. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. And it's, it does create a disconnect when you play that game of gotcha. In fact, there's this behavioral science principle called learned helplessness. And I imagine the help desk, entry-level help desk employee that, really likes technology, decently technical, but still has a lot of growing, right? So they're really confident in their abilities to detect a phish. And now we do these really difficult fish and they fall for it 3 times in a row. And all of a sudden now they're like, well, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I can't detect these. And when you get learned helplessness, you can actually make people less secure. And there have been a number of PhD dissertations as of late, or in the last like 3 years, on this subject. And all of them have found that if you do it like it, you were talking, where you create that negative experience, that you can actually make your users less secure. And so it's certainly, there's an art form to it. And I feel like one of the problems is that we always take some of our most brilliant security minds and put them in charge of security awareness. The problem with that is that our security minds aren't always the most empathetic or the best educated on psychology or behavioral science. And so I think that's part of the breakdown, though, too. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I would say, my wife's a retired school teacher, and if you think of security awareness or these phishing exercises, the outcome is learning, is teaching somebody an activity so that they know it and they have knowledge of it. Education professionals, teachers, instructors, they have a syllabus. They understand what the outcomes they want to get, and here's what the training is. Security professionals, I would have rolled in outside the conversations that I've had with her in the past, which is we're just trying to get through it. We just have a technology. We're going to send them out. We don't really know what that outcome is. We just know we've got to do it, and then we've got to crack people across the knuckles with a ruler because they did something wrong. And teaching I feel like really has a concept of knowing what you want to get out of it, how you're going to do it. And then if somebody doesn't retain it, what remedial action do you take to educate them? Because at the end of it, it's learning that activity. And I mean, I think your point is valid, is that we're not education professionals, but we need to start. I mean, throughout my career, it's even if it's policy related, you're trying to educate people on what that is and why they should care. Training, I feel like, and phishing exercises is really no different. It's an education exercise. I have a luxury at Aya to have a learning and development team that I can work on. Smaller companies I worked at, no, it was me or my team that was doing it. But it's got to be thought of as an education activity and not a security activity.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it needs to adapt. Like, your finance team needs training on all of the different financial fraud attacks that they're going to face in the day-to-day job. And so I think it needs to be a little bit adaptive too. So let's get to predictions. AI. First, from an offensive perspective, what have you seen, and how do you expect it to continue to change? And what does the future look like? Maybe 1 year in the future, and then again 5 years in the future. How does AI impact us from an offensive perspective? And then we'll circle back and we'll go back to defensive perspective and talk through that.
Yeah, good question, because I feel like I don't see things slowing down. I think on the past 20 years that I've been in technology, it's been trying to catch up. The attackers are way ahead of us at all costs, and I feel like from an offensive perspective, I do feel like the old adages where we tell employees to look for misspellings or formatting errors and the like, with artificial intelligence or just the large language model and generative AI side of things is that the attackers have the ability to refine information and make it very much specific to each person they're trying to send those to. And the rules that we've knee-jerked rules to employees to look for don't really apply now, and they really have to home in on this, on the link names, the email addresses, the urgent sense of urgency. So there is an aspect for me on the offensive side is, things are getting so fast now of how the attackers can adjust that, even from a like an old-fashioned signature perspective for like the old-fashioned email security services can't keep up with how fast things are changing, and attackers just need to change certain things, and the signatures don't apply anymore.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I definitely have already seen some of that happening where we're seeing contextual phishing that understands your role within the organization, and more importantly, the organizational like management structure, which is the scary part, because we see these fake chain emails where it will appear to be from, let's say, your CFO and some vendor, and the CFO will give them your email address and say, hey, yeah, reach out to this person, they'll take care of it. But they're sending them to the correct person in finance that would normally get that request, and from the same person that would normally get it. And so it's this perfect spoof, because it's not a spoof, it's just a fake chain or email chain. But when you look at it, it looks like a very real email chain. And so we're seeing that. And where it scares me is that AI is being used to take that contextual information and weaponize it against us. And while it's minimal now, it's growing. And it's heavily focused on wire fraud and other types of financial attacks like that. So, that's certainly one of the areas that concerns me. I also wonder how AI impacts attack surface. From an offensive perspective, it seems to me that the script kiddie is going to get faster and better. It seems to me that the good hacker is going to get great, and the great hacker is going to get phenomenal. Just with the advent of AI, the fact that you can integrate it directly into your command line, directly into your IDE, it changes things. And so I definitely see all of our attacks getting more complex, and a lot more AI based attack with that edge AI built into our payloads. I mean, in theory, you could build your AI or some sort of AI driven polymorphic malware. And so when we see that, it's not going to be an easy one to detect. So, the other thing, so let's talk defense. So the bad guys are going to get better, and we know that it's only going to act as a massive force multiplier for them. But it must have some good side to it too. AI is a double-edged sword. So let's talk about the good side. How does this impact? Let's just talk cybersecurity in general. 5 years from now, how has AI impacted what we're doing as InfoSec professionals?
Yeah, I feel like the same if you want to use a force multiplier side of AI from a defensive perspective is the same as it makes us be able to react to it. We can distill the information down, and we can actually get an action back from the buyers to say, hey, this has happened, or these chain things have happened, and this is your action to do it, and it can actually automate those actions. I think we're kind of trying to do that in store. This action that would do this, but I think that the ability for AI to help help security operations centers, or even just the people responsible for the functions, is to make more informed decisions and have an informed action that they need to take in certain areas. I think related to like even phishing email or defense, the action there is the same as writing phishing emails. I feel like there's the ability to machine learning which is, the ability to take those fine-grained points that a human being wouldn't be able to distill down quickly enough and pull all that data together and say, hey, this is a phishing email, and it should be blocked, and here's why, and doing that really very quickly and not rely on signatures to actually do that. I mean, as we talked about before, things change, so those emails can be changed almost email by email, so they aren't going to be the same going forward. But something with the design to recognize it and get better on each one is going to make us faster and more effective at it. But it's still going to be that battle on who's going to get better each time, right?
Oh yeah, no, we're actually working on bringing a product to market that's right there in what you're talking about. We call it Fish GPT, but what we realized was that we could train a large language model on the cognitive biases that are utilized inside of phishing emails and have it detect based on the underlying psychology instead of the traditional signature. We're seeing a significant improvement in detection capabilities. And the other thing I think that a tool like that can do is just warn users. Even when you don't know 100% if it's good or bad, you can say, hey, this email has these 3 red flags, just be careful. And so I see AI being able to continue to help us in that area. How do you see AI impacting security awareness?
I think, so we went through this perspective, like when I first got into security, where we were doing security awareness training on a yearly basis. It ended up being a little check boxy, and the training wasn't really customized to an organization. So you were doing these trainings, and half the stuff didn't apply for it, apply to the training itself. I feel like AI has the capability to do some real quick customizations to train, like create more distinct customized training for each organization, and even to the point of each department. You could really quickly do that with some of the technologies that I even feel like exist now, to make it more pointed and make it more effective, to the messaging that we want to get across, and even to the point of creating training within a couple hours, because we saw this happen and we want to get training out right away. You don't have that development cycle of a quarter of trying to figure out what that training is going to be on an ongoing basis. I feel like AI is really going to be able to make our training and development content quicker to deploy.
Yeah, no, 100%. In fact, that's a lot of what PhishFirewall is doing is bringing AI to the security awareness front. So no, that's really awesome. Any sort of last words you want to leave with the audience today? Any soapbox you want to get on?
I think the one last thing I would leave the audience with is, we started at the beginning of my journey in security, saying, hey, we're doing security awareness training, and then we ended up in this perspective that security awareness training was a waste of time. And I think we've started coming back up where it's important. So to leave with anybody is, I've seen it be successful, and it helps building the relationships and having an educated workforce, and knowing what's expected of them from a security perspective, and being able to recognize, and even if they, even to the point of, hey, they know who to talk to, and they see something on TV, and being able to talk with them and really getting rid of the hype and really talking to them about what it really is. Security awareness is probably the one area where you're directly interacting with employees. So don't discount it. It's important, but your messaging needs to be on point. You need to treat employees like they're human beings, and be empathetic to what they're against, and not treat them like it's just something you need to do. And, hey, there's a technical solution to everything. The employees are the big help, and they are your IDS for your security program.
Oh, 100%. I truly believe that the goal of all security awareness programs should be to make that sure that EDR is never used. To me, the EDRs are, it's so often treated like the first line of defense, but it should really be our last line of defense, at least on the endpoint anyway. And so, I definitely agree with you. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to talking with you again soon. And you don't have to hang up. I'm just going to end the stream.